Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel and the series on Napoleonic figures specifically. Today we're going to look at a man that, although born in Austria, was to become one of Napoleon's most experienced generals, André-Joseph Boussard. Now, anyone that's seen my favourite units video will know that I absolutely love me some French Dragoons, so I couldn't pass up the opportunity to record a video on this guy, the Walloon general. Boussard, or as he was born, André-Joseph Boussart, was born on the 13th of November 1758 in Binche, which is now in Belgium, but then it was part of the Austrian Netherlands, subject to the Habsburgs ruling out of Vienna. At 17, Boussard joined the Austrian army, and by 1789 had become a lieutenant of dragoons. For many decades there had been an undercurrent of discontent in Belgium, not least because of the Walloon population were Catholic, and resented the religious reforms of Joseph II, which they considered to be anti-Catholic. This, inspired by the American and French revolutions, resulted in the Brabant Revolution, Brabant being a region of Belgium, the one that Waterloo is located in actually, and the setting up of the United States of Belgium. While Austria may not have been the absolute powerhouse it once was, it was more than powerful to take on this tiny emerging state. Despite the humiliating defeat on the 29th of October 1789 at Turnhout, the rebels were eventually crushed, so the humiliating defeat was on the part of the Austrians. Like many Belgian revolutionaries, Boussard was obliged to flee to France after the revolution had failed, and in his new country he was appointed as captain of the Dragoon de Hainaut, a regiment of Belgian patriots serving in the French Army du Nord. So that's spelled D-R-A-G-O-N-S, and then it's D'-H-A-I-N-A-U-T. So I do apologise if I've massacred that pronunciation, which I'm sure I have. Being a unit made up of patriots, the squadron also contained his brother Felix and his brother-in-law Isaac. Boussard distinguished himself at Jemappes and was promoted to lieutenant colonel on the field of battle by General Dumouriez, before being involved in a further action against an Austrian column on the 1st of March 1793 at the Battle of La Roche. Despite hard fighting, the dragoons found themselves overwhelmed by the huge number of Austrians, but retired from the field in good order, having held up the Austrian pursuit to the retreating French for 8 hours in the valley of the Ourthe. After the fall of Robespierre, he was reappointed to his dragoon regiment by the Directory, which had now been rebaptised the 20th Dragoon Regiment. As the focus of the fighting moved to the south of France's borders, Boussard was transferred to the Army of Italy as a chef de squadron of the 20th Dragoons, fighting at the Battle of Mondovì on the 21st of April 1796. In this action he was wounded 3 times by sabre cuts while fighting Piedmontese cavalrymen. At the Battle of Lodi, he crossed the Adda with 2 squadrons of cavalry outflanking the Austrians, and at the Battle of Castiglione on the 5th of August, he and a party of cavalry captured a group of Austrian hussars. Due to this dashing swashbuckling, on the 7th of January 1797, he was promoted to chef de brigade by Bonaparte himself. That's the same rank as colonel. Appointed brigadier of the same regiment of dragoons on January the 7th, 1797, like so many soldiers, Boussard followed Napoleon to Egypt and fought at the Battle of the Pyramids on the 21st of July 1798, and at the Battle of Abu Kia Bay on the 25th of July 1799. His valour and his distinguished conduct earned him the rank of Provisional Brigadier General, which was conferred upon him in Egypt by General-in-Chief Menou on September the 25th, 1800. As this date suggests, he was one of the men that had been left behind and abandoned by Napoleon, and he continued to fight in Egypt. At the Battle of Alexandria on March the 21st, 1801, he charged at the head of his brigade, had tumbled the first line of English and received 5 wounds, taking him to a running total of 8 and requiring him to take several months to convalesce. At the end of the siege of Alexandria on 2nd of September 1801, he was ordered to sign the Articles of Capitulation and return to France, being confirmed in his rank of Brigadier General by decree of the consuls dated December the 14th, 1801. 2 years later, on the 11th of December 1803, he became one of the founding members of the Légion d'honneur. Boussard was employed with the Army of the Coasts in the Bordeaux military district, and he commanded the 2nd Division of Dragoons, and it was there that he was appointed commander of the Légion d'honneur on June the 14th, 1804, taking charge of a brigade in Frederick-Henri Walther's 2nd Dragoon Division. He fought at the Battle of Austerlitz on 2nd December, before moving on to Prussia and the Battle of Jena the following year. In this campaign, he was at the head of the 3rd Brigade, now under Emmanuel Grouchy. This brigade consisted of the 13th and 22nd Dragoon Regiments, each of 3 squadrons. Grouchy's division missed the Battle of Jena-Auerstadt, but became deeply involved in the pursuit of the defeated Prussian armies. At Zdenich on the 26th of October, Grouchy's division crushed a 1,300-man Prussian brigade, decimating the Königen Dragoon Regiment, one of the Prussian Dragoon regiments. The next day, the Gendarmes Cuirassier Regiment No. 10 blundered into Grouchy's marching column at Wischmansdorf near Boitzenburg. 3 of Grouchy's regiments attacked the Prussians, trapping them against a marsh and forcing their surrender. The day after that, Boussard's dragoons played a key role in the Battle of Prenzlau on the 28th of October, which is, I think this battle would be an awesome scenario. Marshal Joachim Murat led Grouchy's division, Marc-Antoine de Beaumont's 3rd Dragoon Division, Anton Lassalle's Light Cavalry Brigade, and 3,000 of Marshal Jean Lannes' infantry against Frederick Louis, Prince of Hohenlohe, Ingelfingen's 1,200 Prussians. I definitely pronounced that wrong. The Prussians approached Prenzlau from the northwest while the French came up from the southwest. Murat sent Lassalle's brigade directly against Hohenlohe's covering force, while ordering one of Beaumont's brigades to make a wide circle to the west. Meanwhile, he detached Boussard's brigade and sent it to ford the stream on the western outskirts of the town. Boussard's horsemen charged the Prussian marching column, smashing into it from the side, and the attack was a complete success. The French dragoons hacked their way through the Prussian column and seized many prisoners. Boussard's troopers cleared the road as far as the city gates, inflicting about 1,000 casualties and capturing 8 guns. Still, he wasn't finished in this campaign. On the 2nd and 3rd of November, the 22nd Dragoons of Boussard's brigade secured the surrender of the small port of Volgast on the Baltic Sea. Hohenlohe's baggage train of 500 wagons with 2,500 wagon men and other non-combatants fell into the hands of the French. Grouchy's division arrived in time to take part in the Battle of Lubeck on the 6th of November. And after the French infantry had cleared the city streets, the dragoons moved through them to fall upon a Prussian detachment at Krempelsdorf. They forced Major End to surrender with 360 cavalrymen and 4 guns, and Boussard was again wounded on the 23rd of December at the Battle of Zarnowo. 3 days later, he was seriously wounded at the Battle of Pultusk, and his horse was either killed or seriously wounded under him whilst he was fighting on Lannes' left flank. The War of the Fourth Coalition wasn't quite finished yet, however, and the Battle of Eylau on the 7th and 8th of February 1807 was the bloodiest in the Napoleonic era so far. Grouchy's 2,200-strong division included Boussard's brigade, joined in Murat's grand charge at the critical moment during the bloody contest, smashing a potential Russian breakthrough. The dragoons first drove off the Russian cavalry, menacing Louis Vincent Leblond de Saint-Hilaire's infantry division. This was after they'd been almost obliterated by Russian artillery. Then Murat led them in an attack that defeated the Russian cavalry in the centre. By this time, 2nd Cuirassier Division had become isolated after carving their own path through 2 lines of Russian infantry. Marshal Jean-Baptiste Béziers now led the Guard cavalry to the rescue in the famous Charge of the Gods, and after being rebuffed by the Russian second line, Grouchy's troopers joined the Horse Grenadiers of the Imperial Guard and smashed their way through. Finally, the French reserve cavalry has cut its way from now behind Russian lines, losing between 1,000 and 1,500 troopers altogether. Boussard also fought at Friedland, but compared to his previous exploits, he doesn't seem to have done anything particularly spectacular there. With the war in Central Europe finished, the Treaty of Tilsit signed, peace descended upon the continent, and you'd be forgiven for thinking that it was time to rest and recuperate for the much wounded Boussard, but you'd be wrong. When Napoleon turned his gaze upon Spain, he would take with him his faithful general of dragoons. In 1808 he was with Pierre Dupont de Letang's corps in Andalusia. He led a cavalry brigade that consisted of the 6th Provincial Dragoon Regiment that numbered some 620 troopers. On the 17th of July, his command was detached with Dominique Honoré Antoine Vedel's division to march to Balienne as part of l'Armée d'Aragon. However, Vedel marched beyond the town, in the mistaken belief that the Spanish had seized the passes to the north, when in fact Theodore von Reding's 17,000-man Spanish corps arrived at Balian on the 18th and occupied the town without opposition. This placed Dupant's 11,000 men squarely between the two Spanish corps, and in the Battle of the Balion, Dupont failed to break out of the trap and asked for terms. A day or so later, Vedel's division returned, unaware that negotiations were ongoing, and so, seeing the mass of Spanish troopers, he ordered Boussard's dragoons to attack, capturing about 1,000, probably incredibly surprised, Spanish troops. Upon finding out the full situation, Vedel ceased his attacks and released the prisoners they had taken. As Dupont surrendered, Vedel began retreating north in accordance with secret orders from his superior. Later, when the Spaniards threatened to massacre Dupont's men, unless Vedel was included in the capitulation, Dupont sent an order to Vedel to return to Balian and surrender. Amazingly, Vedel followed the order, even though his own division was not surrounded, and this more than doubled the total of unwounded prisoners the Spanish had taken, from 8,242 to 17,635. While Dupont and the French generals were returned to France, the enlisted men spent the rest of the war in prison hulks moored off Cadiz, or on the bleak island of Cabrera, half of them dying from disease or starvation. Luckily for Boussard, he was blameless in the entire incident, and Napoleon was still on top of his game and managed to continue the campaign successfully. On January 1810, Boussard was given a new command, heading up the 1,900-strong cavalry element of Suchet's 3rd Cavalry Corps. On the 23rd of April, at Margalef in Catalonia, Suchet encountered 7,300 Spaniards, together with 6 artillery pieces under General Henry O'Donnell. The 6,000 Frenchmen included Louis-Francois Félix Mousnier's division and the 13th Cuirassiers and the 4th Hussar regiments. In the event, the 500 Cuirassiers won the battle almost single-handed. The French horsemen suffered 100 casualties, but killed or captured 8 Spanish colonels, 271 other officers, 5,600 soldiers, 1,000 horses, 3 standards, 1 flag, and 500,000 cartridges. I'm not really sure what the difference between a standard and a flag is in this context. Maybe it's a royal colour and a regimental colour, or maybe it's more like a cavalry guidon or something. I'm not really sure, but in my research, that's what I read the captures were. So there you go. Boussard received Chief General Suchet's highest compliments for his actions, and he also helped repel the night attack that the Valencian chief Bassecourt made on November the 26th against the French camp in Vinaròs near Oldecona. Taking the lead of the Cuirassiers and the Hussars, he charged the attackers, smashing their lines, and pursued them as far as Benicarlos. As I've said many times, it's the pursuit, especially when cavalry are involved, that's the most horrific, and this was to be no different. One thing that made this occasion particularly bad for the Spanish was that to be avoiding being killed by flashing French cavalry sabres, many rushed into the sea and were there drowned. Late 1810 saw an aspect that was particularly common in the wars in Spain, sieges, and these were no places for cavalry to shine. And although Boussard's brigade, now consisting of the 13th Cuirassier, 4th Hussar and 24th Dragoon regiments, were present, they didn't have any major role to provide beyond having pickets for the lines, raiding the local area for food and supplies, and intelligence, finding food and escorting messages here and there. We haven't quite reached the heights of the Insurrecto or the guerrilla war, so it was a fairly uncomplicated affair. Boussard also participated in the siege of Tarragona from the 5th of May to the 29th of June 1811. Now commanding his 3 French regiments, plus the Italian Napoleonic Dragoon regiment, he ordered his men to dismount and assault the Alcova hill on foot. The Cuirassiers would make great conversion opportunities for you here. I'm not really sure what you could do. Certainly the Perry dismounted Dragoons, I think, would be a good start. Don't know really where you can get the Cuirassiers from. Yeah, don't know. But any ideas? Pop them down in the comments below. Or even if there's a company that make dismounted Dragoons in 28mm. I know there is in 15, because I've got a load of them. But, anyone who makes dismounted Dragoons in 28mm, please let me know. I'd be interested to find that one out. Anyway, by the end of the action, the French besiegers had lost 4,300 killed and wounded, while the Spanish defenders had lost 7,000 killed and 8,000 captured. Twice during the operation, Suchet formed expeditions to chase off Spanish armies attempting to relieve the garrison. On the 15th of July 1811, Boussard was promoted to the rank of General de Division, becoming personal friends with Marshal Suchet and commanding 1,876 cavalrymen in 3 regiments. In September, his command rose to 2,405 in 14 squadrons. I believe that was scattered over 5 regiments. I'm not 100% sure about that one. It's 4 or 5 regiments. In late summer, Suchet launched an invasion of the provinces of Valencia, arriving before the ancient fortress of Saguntum on the 23rd of September 1811. After the garrison repelled 2 French assaults, a relief army of Joachim Blake Yoyoyas appeared and the 2 sides clashed in the Battle of Saguntum on the 25th of October. Whilst the French dispersed Blake's left flank rather easily, the fighting in the centre and on the right of the Spanish line was much tougher. Early in the action, Suchet committed 3 squadrons of cavalry to retake some ground. Soon afterwards, the Spanish cavalry overran a French battery, and Suchet sent 350 troopers of the 13th Cuirassiers to see them off. Leading the charge, Boussard scattered the Spanish horsemen and recaptured them. Hewing a path through their opponents, the armour-clad heavy cavalrymen then went on to capture a Spanish artillery battery before their impetus was spent. When Suchet ordered the 24th Dragoons to attack, the rout of Blake's army became a general one, and for the loss of 1,000 casualties, the French had inflicted 6,000 killed and wounded on the Spanish, not including several hundred prisoners. The 2,500-man Saguntum garrison, seeing this spectacle, capitulated the next day. In the operations immediately preceding the siege of Valencia, Suchet concentrated most of his army in an envelopment of the landward flank of Blake's defences. Fooled by diversionary attacks, Blake failed to detect Suchet's manoeuvre until it was too late. Led by 1 squadron of the 4th Hussars, Jean-Isidore Harispe's division reached a position behind the Spanish left flank. Coming upon the Spanish cavalry reserves near Aldea and Torrent, Boussard recklessly led 60 hussars to attack the vastly more numerous Spanish horsemen. Soon he was covered in sabre wounds, and his bravest men were cut down around him. Luckily, Jacques-Antoine Adrien Delort came to the rescue with more cavalry. After Harispe and the French cavalry routed the Spanish troopers, they found Boussard seriously wounded and lying amongst the fallen, after having been robbed of his epaulettes, his medals, and his sword. Which I think is a rather telling insight to these battles. After the fall of Valencia, Boussard became civil administrator of the city in order for him to recover from his wounds. And this is quite an interesting part of his life. Being a Walloon, he was ethnically Spanish and a Catholic. And in a conflict that many Spanish saw in stark religious and ethnic lines, here was a man who was, quote, one of them. For this reason, he seems to have been quite highly respected, even by the population he was overseeing the occupation of, and he was called the Brave Walloon by the Spanish soldiers. However, he never really recovered from his injuries in the siege of Valencia, and from the summer of 1812 onwards his health deteriorated, and he was moved to Bagnères de Bigorre, Hautes-Pyrénées, in southern France. There, after 30 years of military service and 23 wounds, he died on August 11th, 1813. Supposedly his last words to his brother Felix on his deathbed were, quotes, "Ah, my dear Isaac, let the Emperor know that the only thing I have regret as I die is that I will not have chance to do more service for him and my country." So, that's it. General Boussard, the Dragoon general. Something of a swashbuckler, and I think possibly overshadowed by the likes of LaSalle or Murat, and I think maybe a little unfairly. And on the tabletop, well, what a guy he was. I think the hard-fighting Belgian joined a rebellion in his native country and fought across the length and breadth of Europe at the head of an equally hard-fighting cavalry brigade, so I couldn't really ignore him, to be honest. Always in the thick of the fighting, André-Joseph Boussard wasn't particularly distinctive in his dress, so I think any General de Brigade mini that you can find, get your hands on, I think you could use that. I would suggest a particularly aggressive, chargy looking one, but I don't think it really matters. Although he did have a pretty sweet moustache. It's sort of like a Zorro moustache. So either find a figure with one of those, or you might have to sculpt one on yourself. But if you look on the pictures we've used in this video, you can see he had a sweet moustache going on. On the tabletop, I would give him a strategy rating of 7. I don't think he was particularly famous as a strategist. He wasn't, a Napoleon or someone super cunning. He was just really brave. So I think that's fairly average, and I think that would probably suit him. But what I would say is that he was a man who knew how to exploit a gap in the enemy lines and use his cavalry to the utmost, fighting against almost anyone. Infantry cavalry, heavier cavalry than he had, did not matter. This means that when I would suggest, so rules for him, that when cavalry that are in his division are fighting, then they always count as being heavier than their opponents. So what I mean by that in black powder terms is that they gain +1 to the heavy cavalry rule. Or, in the case of the 4th Hussars, they gain the heavy cavalry D1. So, to sort of lay it out, the Hussars gain heavy cavalry D1. The Dragoons get heavy cavalry D1 +1, or heavy cavalry 2. He also conducted several looping outflanking manoeuvres, and that's where I take the inspiration from for this rule. When leading a brigade of cavalry, so that's either the 13th and 22nd Dragoon regiments, if he's fighting in Germany, or if he's in Spain, then it will be Suchet's cavalry, so the 13th Cuirassier, the 4th Hussar, the 24th Dragoon regiments, and the Napoleonic Italian Dragoons, then he can opt to outflank the enemy. So don't set him up on the table, but from turn 3 onwards, he can order his troops on as normal, so as if they were in regular reserve, but the difference is they can come on from any table edge that isn't the opponent's deployment zone, so not too far forward. I don't think we should be able to get behind them. They can't charge the turn they arrive, but they must enter the table if the order is successful, and that's a nod to the confusion they had at Berlin when they charged the Spanish whilst the surrender negotiations were going on. And the Cuirassiers would get D3 +1, D3 is normal, plus their 1 for being part of Boussard's brigade. I think he should personally add 3 dice to any combat that he is in, and if he would be removed as a casualty, roll the dice. On a 3+, he instead joins another unit from the brigade within 18, and if there's no units or it happens a second time, or he rolls a 1 or a 2, then he's been grievously wounded and he's removed from play as normal. And that's it. That's it for the Brave Walloon. Outside of Belgium, I think he's a bit of an unsung hero of the Grande Armée. Belgium's contribution to the French army is often overshadowed, I think, by the controversy, shall we say, about its performance during Waterloo and the 100 Days. But I think it's quite an interesting topic. I think it's almost like the Poles, which regular viewers of the channel will know I've got a real soft spot for. I think they're not unlike those guys, but obviously on a much smaller scale. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed our very quick gallop through the Walloon General. I hope you're all staying safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.